Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the South Planning Committee. We are not expecting a fire drill this afternoon, so if the alarm bell does sound, please leave the building through the emergency exits each side of the room or behind you. The meeting is being recorded and streamed via YouTube, therefore any members of the public present should be aware that they may be recorded, even if they are not participating in the meeting. If this causes any concern, please can you let one of us know. Please can you switch your mobile phones to silent during the meeting. There is a public question time where we would appreciate we would appreciate speakers attending. This will help to improve our service and committee meetings in the future. Planning applications, the Chair will announce the agenda item number. The Planning Officer will introduce the application with all relevant updates and provide a visual presentation. The Chair will call upon public speakers to present, and then the Chair will ask members' officers if they have any points of clarification, followed by any technical questions, and then the entire committee will discuss and debate each application. Members may seek further clarification of specific points from officers regarding the application or on points raised by the speakers in the main debate through myself as Chair. Officers will respond to questions raised by members when asked. The committee will then make a decision by a vote. Just let a couple of people sit down. Okay, if we can start with agenda item 1, apologies for absence.
Yeah, I have apologies from Councillor Jenny Snell and Peter Sieb. Councillor Mike Stanton was substituting for Peter Sieb and Councillor Richard Wilkins for Jenny Snell.
Thank you. If we go to agenda item 2, minutes from the previous meeting held on the 22nd of August. Are members happy that it's a true reflection of the meeting and for me to sign the minutes?
Agreed.
Okay. It's okay. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any members that need to make any declarations on any item that's on the agenda this afternoon, sorry? No. Okay, before we go into public question time, as Peter's away and I'm chairing, I would like to propose that Councillor Patrick vice chairs for the duration of the meeting. Are members happy with Councillor Patrick vice chairing? Okay. We do a little switch around of chairs. Okay, agenda item 4, public question time. There are no members of the public registered to speak in public question time, which takes us on to agenda item 5, which is the planning application, land at Head Street, Tinton Hall, Yeovil. I'll pass you to Colin.
Thank you, Chair. This is a reserved matters application for the erection of 28 dwellings. The outline application was allowed at appeal, which approved the layout and the access. The affordable housing and open space contributions were secured at that time through a Section 106 agreement. The matters to be considered are appearance, landscaping and scale. Additionally, this application seeks to discharge the outline condition regarding biodiversity enhancement. This is the location of the site, situated centrally within Tinton Hall, 303 junction with Head Street, top left. Zoomed in slightly, showing Head Street, St Margaret's Road and Montacute Road. Satellite image of the site. Closer view of the site. It's important for the committee to take into account that this is a reserved matters application to only consider appearance, landscaping and scale, and discharge of the biodiversity condition. The principle of this development has been established by the approval of the outline application at appeal. The planning inspector approved the layout and access as shown in this drawing. Key considerations for the committee to take into account are appearance, landscaping and scale. For clarification, appearance refers to the visual elements that determine how a building is perceived. It includes aspects like the external design of the development, its architecture and materials. Landscaping encompasses activities such as creating screening with fences or walls, planting trees, hedges, shrubs or grass, forming banks or terraces, establishing gardens, courtyards, squares, water features and other amenity features. Scale relates to the size of each building within the development in terms of its height, width and length, considering how it fits into its environment. These are the three elements that the committee are limited to in its consideration of this reserved matters application. Of note is the applicant's phosphate mitigation scheme that has been approved by the local authority's ecologist and endorsed by Natural England, which will be secured by way of a Section 106 agreement. For information, this is an adoptable package treatment plant which incorporates chemical dosing to provide significantly enhanced phosphorus removal and will be adopted and managed by Albion Water. The Council's ecologist is content with the biodiversity enhancements proposed and to be secured by conditions. In terms of consultee responses, the Parish Council will maintain its objection to the reserved matters application, which is copied in full in the officer's report before you. All other statutory consultees have responded positively. There have been 12 objections, 1 neutral comment and 1 supporter, which have been summarised in the report and are available in full on the Council's planning portal. This is the approved layout. Please note that the drainage requirements as set out in condition 9 of the outline permission have been discharged, which the LLFA provided its approval for. This includes a swale and an underground surface water storage tank in this area. The 10 affordable houses have been secured through a Section 106 agreement at the outline stage, along with contributions for open space provision. In terms of appearance, this is the proposed street scene. It shows chalet-style bungalows, plots 1 to 4. And these match the existing bungalows on Head Street. A two-story dwelling, which plot 5 to the left of the entrance, and a barn-style part single-story, part 2-story dwellings, plot 6 and 7 to the left. This closely follows the street scene that was considered at appeal by the planning inspector as being acceptable. This is plot 1 and 2. That's plot 1 and 2 there. Materials are Roman tiles, timber cladding, reconstituted stone lintels and recon stone elevations. It's plots 3 and 4. Show these dwellings here. Again, materials are Roman tile, recon stone and timber cladding. That's 5.6 meters to the ridge. Plot 5. It's plot 5 next to the entrance there. Materials are slate roof, reconstituted stone for the walls and sills and for the water tabling. It's 9.2 meters to the ridge. It's plot 6 and 7. That's these dwellings here. Again, Roman tiles, reconstituted stone and timber cladding, 6.5 to the ridge here and 8.6 meters to the ridge. This is plot 16, 17, 27 and 28. They're located in this area here. Again, Roman tiles, brick, reconstituted stone and timber cladding. Plots 8 to 12. That's this group of dwellings in this position. And again, Roman tiles, reconstituted stone, timber cladding. This is plot 19 to 21. Located in this area here. in the materials slate roof, reconstituted stone, timber cladding, reconstituted stone for the lintels and the walls, and it's 9.3 metres to the ridge. Overall, it's considered that the varied materials proposed are acceptable. The scale of buildings are varied between single-storey and two-storey dwellings, fit in well with the neighbouring dwellings, and work well within the proposed development without harm to both external residential amenity and the future residents' amenity. In the committee report, a condition is absent that controls the use of materials, and it is suggested that this condition is added in the event the committee find this application acceptable. Landscaping plan shows the introduction of substantial and varied planting scheme, and importantly, the retention of the native hedging along the road frontage. It's considered that landscaping scheme is acceptable and its implementation is secured by way of conditions. This plan shows the biodiversity measures proposed, which comprise of bat, bird and bee bricks, along with measures to encourage access for hedgehogs, which has been considered by the council's ecologists as being acceptable and sufficient to discharge condition 5 of the outline planning permission. In conclusion, it's considered that the appearance, scale and landscaping details are acceptable, the information to discharge the biodiversity enhancement condition is acceptable, and subject to a Section 106 agreement securing phosphate mitigation and conditions, the application is recommended to the committee for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll start with public speakers. We have no objectors or supporters registered to speak, so we'll go straight to the parish councillor. It's Heather Bryant, who's a representative for Tintinhole Parish Council. Councillor Bryant here.
I'm Heather Bryant. I'm representing the views of Tintinhole Parish Council.
Sorry, Mrs. Bryant, I can see you now. Sorry.
Do you want me to stand up? No. Noting that the outline planning consent is now 7 years old, and 6 years have passed since the appeal, approving much has changed since then. Tintinhole Parish Council continues to maintain its most strong objection to the proposed development in its present form, and is not content with the applicant's response to the REM. Tintinhole Parish Council has no essential objection to the land in question being built upon to provide housing, but objects to very real issues arising from this development plan, including REM matters that were not considered fully during the appeal process. Apart from the initial public consultation in 2016, there has been no attempt whatsoever by the applicant to consult with the parish in this matter. Can that be reasonable, fair, democratic, to overlook local concerns? Detailed objections to the REM matters remain as in the Council's letter of the 23rd of September 2020. However, things have moved on since outline planning approval was given. I would like to point out that although County Highways saw no issues with the original development at the time of the appeal in 2017, since then nearly 200 houses were approved in Broomsmore, a large school has begun construction further towards Martock on Head Street. There has been a significant upswing in traffic volume on Head Street, a shortcut to the A303 with more to come. There remains huge concern regarding the highway safety related to this access to and egress from the site, and also with a narrow, possibly hazardous shared surface lane in the east of the development. The addition of 28 homes worth of vehicles, with most families being 2-vehicle households, plus delivery vehicles, etc., discharging at a single point onto a bend in a busy road and at a traffic calming build-out, surely cannot be supported from a safety point of view. In addition to our specific REM points, please do consider in particular the details in paras 3, 4 and 5 of the Council's objections. So, to conclude, please let us now pause and have another formal review of this proposal with a proper full consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other members wishing to speak, so I'll move on to the agent, Matt Frost. Thank you, Matt.
Can you hear me okay? Good. Thank you, Chairman, members. As you've heard from your officers, this site already has outline planning permission for the erection of 28 dwellings, which was granted on appeal some 6 years ago. The outline planning permission has approved the site layout and all matters in relation to access. And as you've heard, the surface water drainage details have also been approved. So as such, members, the only issues here for consideration today are the appearance and scale of the buildings and the landscaping of the site. As you've heard, the scheme for biodiversity enhancements has also been submitted as part of this application, and that's acceptable to the county ecologist. With regard to appearance, the western part of the site is designed to reflect a traditional farmhouse, which is on plot 5, next door courtyard of low-slung barns along the western boundary with the adjoining countryside. And I would stress, members, this approach was supported by the council's landscape architect at the outline stage when that layout was being designed. The eastern part of the site are more traditional residential designs, and a range of materials are proposed, as you've heard, including reconstructed hamstone along the site frontage and in other key parts of the site. And as you've heard, there is also a materials condition proposed for final sign-off on materials by your officers at discharge of conditions stage. With regard to the appearance, 14 of the proposed buildings, so that's 50% of the buildings on the site, Chairman, are single-storey only. These low-slung buildings are proposed in the most sensitive parts of the site, along the western boundary to reduce impact upon the open countryside, and also in the north and eastern boundary of the site where there is a listed building in proximity. The majority of the proposed buildings along Head Street, as you can see, their members are single-storey as well. And there will be no overlooking of the neighbouring bungalows opposite plot 5, which is over 38 metres from plot 5. And members will also note, if you've been to the site or if you've looked at it on Google, Chairman, that the bungalows on the opposite side of the road are equally elevated above the road level as this site is, and those neighbouring properties are set back behind sort of metre-high retaining walls. And the floor levels of the buildings, I think, as you've heard from your planning officer, there is an outline, there's a condition on the outline planning permission that also requires approval of the floor levels of the buildings. There's a very detailed landscaping scheme that's been submitted. As you've heard, your officers are happy with that. Chairman, it is acknowledged that this proposal is not popular with the local community, but the vast majority of the objections that have been received are all in relation to matters which have been approved by the Outline Planning Commission and which were found to be acceptable to the planning inspector. Members, in conclusion, this is a good proposal. The approval of this application will put an end to the lengthy planning delays that have been experienced on this site to date, allowing the delivery of 28 dwellings as a valuable contribution to the housing and land supply shortfall in the district, and 10 of these houses will be provided as affordable homes for local people. And with 32 households in housing need, identifying Tinton-Hall as their first choice parish on the Home Finder Somerset housing list as of January 2023, this affordable housing contribution is a very valuable benefit indeed, Chairman. I hope that members are able to support your officer's recommendation and vote in favour of the application today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, so we move on to questions. Does anyone have any questions or points of clarification on anything raised by either the agent or the parish council? Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Chairman. In the report, there's mention made of a shared 5-metre shared surface.
Councillor Osborne, this is just at the moment on questions raised by the parish council or the agent.
I'm sorry. Will members get a
Yes.
chance to ask questions?
Yes.
Because we normally do that
Yep.
first before speakers, don't we? Not now. Okay.
Any other points of clarification on people who've already spoken? Okay. If not, then we'll move on to technical questions for the officer, and I'll bring you straight back in then, Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Chairman. Within the report, there is reference to a shared 5-metre shared surface, and I think there are some concerns by residents about how that's going to work in practice. Could you just bring up, please, Colin, the bit with the shared surface and say a little bit more about it? Presumably that's shared between pedestrians and vehicles.
Is this the area that you're talking about, this shared surface here? This layout including the access, as was approved at outline stage at the appeal. This shared surfacing, this arrangement, internal arrangement, hasn't changed. So this has already been approved.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks for the clarification, because there's always that little bit of grey between what's already there and what's to be. But thanks for the clarification.
Thank you. Councillor Wales?
Not sure whether it's a proper question, but you mentioned that the section you just showed us was where the affordable homes were? I think.
That's correct. This is the affordable
Right.
section.
So that
here.
they're all in one block, are they?
Correct. Yes.
Ah, right. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Best?
Yeah, slightly off-piste, but I'll say it anyway. Item 6, the recommendations following. This is regarding the electric vehicle points that are put in. Can I have clarification? Is that every parking spot will have one? Also, where it comes to, I think it's plot 6 at the bottom, their parking spaces are a considerable amount of distance away from the dwelling itself. Now, knowing that the way things change, if it's going to have a 16 amp single phase, is it possible that these away from dwelling points could be ducted so that if you need to put higher capacity voltage in, then it could be drawn through rather than having to dig every road up?
I have had the opportunity to have a talk to the agent about this. They're very happy to accept a condition. We have a condition for the EV points, and we could beef that condition up so that it is more precise in terms of the location of the charging points.
Thank you. If there are no further questions from members. Okay. It's normal for members of the council who aren't on this committee to register to speak before the meeting. I understand Councillor Bailey, who's the ward member, wishes to speak, but unfortunately hasn't registered, but I will allow him to speak if he wants to comment at this point.
Thank you, Chair. Well, bearing in mind the limitations that are imposed on this meeting and the planning today, I'd just like to make one major point, really. Firstly, it's support of the parish council's proposals, mainly because there's been a substantial amount of time has passed. Perhaps I should have sent a ward member from Martock, that covers Tittle as well, along with Emily here. A substantial amount of time has passed since it was first proposed, and I and Emily have been involved with quite a lot of work on the safety of the road, the main road, Head Street, going through Tintnall and onto Ash. And my concern is that there's been a lot of changes. There's a build-out that we put in there, particularly to slow the traffic down, and been a lot of changes on that road in terms of the amount of traffic, and also the SEND school that's being built just on the Ash side of the A303. So my thoughts are that needs to be taken into account, and that's really what the council has proposed, the parish council proposed, and I would support that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we move into the discussion and debate. Can I just remind members that the reserve matters have already been decided on, the layout, access and drainage is already said, and we're now looking at the appearance, scale and landscape. Who would like to kick us off? Councillor Osborne.
Thank you. It's unfortunate that so much time has passed on this application, and it's not going to be the only one we're going to be dealing with where there's a huge length of time passed between having something imposed in effect by an inspector at appeal and now having to deal with the day-to-day. It does seem that we are very heavily constrained in what we can and cannot recommend. And it seems as though we are basically constrained, saying, well, are we happy with the design of the houses, the landscaping, the environmental clauses, which have already passed muster with officers, and the biodiversity conditions are fairly standard on most applications, so I don't think we could object to those. In terms of design and appearance, that is when it gets very subjective, because what one person thinks is marvellous, another doesn't. And unfortunately, correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't see anything in this report referring to Tintinoll having a village design statement even, although it does have a village plan which goes back, I think, to about 2015. So there's very little we can really do to address the issues of traffic and highways, because that was already decided in the original principles and decided at the appeal. So I'm afraid I sort of feel that our hands in some ways are tied on those matters, because there's no legal framework for going back and revisiting them. And if we did, then I think we would find ourselves at appeal or at judicial review.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any comments or further questions at this point? Councillor Osborne?
Yeah, I did raise my points at the end, and I'd be interested to hear what our legal officer has to say on that particular issue.
Thank you, Chair. Just to introduce myself, because members won't have seen me before, my name is Martin Evans. I'm one of the planning solicitors for the council. And just to answer the councillor's questions, the planning officer has very clearly set out what is before you today in terms of the reserve matters that you have to look at. It's been explained that outlined the principle of this development, and the number of houses has already been established, as has the access. So issues around highway access and highway safety have already been dealt with. So as the councillor intimated, discussion and debate around those sort of issues are pretty much now past, and members should concentrate on the matters that the case officer has set out in the presentation. Just while I'm speaking, can I just check, in terms of the beefed up condition relating to the charging points, whether that forms part of the officer recommendation now, or would members need to move that if they wanted to see that put forward?
There is our standard condition on supplying EV points, and it does say it should be a 16 amp point, but all these details have got to be submitted prior to occupation. So we could change these slightly to indicate that we expect or anticipate every parking space to have an EV charging point.
I think the question Councillor Best put was, will it be possible to have ducting so that if the cable needs to be upgraded, it can be pulled through rather than the streets constantly being dug up? Is that something that needs Councillor Best to put in a recommendation with that attached to it, or is that something you can add in as one of your conditions?
If the committee are minded to approve this scheme, we certainly can talk about that particular condition and putting a clause in there about ducting.
Councillor Best?
Yeah, I think it's more relevant because of the distances away from the properties that these parking spaces are, and the problems that would cause in the future if you have to amend them.
Councillor Wales?
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, looking at the main points we have to consider, and not as some of the objections which were raised in the report by the parish, we have to concentrate on those. And like Councillor Osborne, I would be very hard pushed to find anything not to approve this scheme as it is before us. The matter of appearance I find quite interesting. I know for a fact that one of the big problems with the planning system at the moment is single occupancy dwellings. There is a huge shortage in Somerset of single occupancy dwellings. this scheme actually goes a little way to helping with that problem. We have seen over the years many scheme in villages. Some of them we don't like at all. This one, I have to say, although it is obviously in a greenfield site, it is, in my view, from what we've seen on the slide, acceptable in design, especially as we can condition, as I understand, the materials, which is part of the officer's report. So I think I'm going to take the plunge here and propose that we accept this report, and I'll propose that, Chairman. That helps.
Thank you, Councillor Whale. Are you happy to attach Councillor Best's comments about the ducting?
Indeed, yes.
Okay, thank you. We have a proposal on the table. Councillor Best? Councillor Best is seconding. Does anyone else wish to make any further comment or have any further questions? If not, can I have a show of hands of all of those in favour of the proposal? Okay, I believe that's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we move on to agenda item 6, planning application for land at Townsend Green. I'll just give you a couple of minutes for the officers to swap laptops and for anyone that wishes to leave us. Okay, thank you, members. Okay, we've had a bit of a changeover of officers and we're ready to move forward on this application. For members that are not aware, Adam Garland from the Highways Department is also joining and going to assist in the presentation of this application. I'll hand you over to Catherine. Might just need to wait for Angie to come back. My apologies. Are we okay? Okay.
This is a Section 73 application to vary Condition 10.3 for a scheme for pedestrian improvements of the outline approval that was allowed by the inspectors in 2018 for up to 130 dwellings with public open space, landscaping, sustainable drainage systems with access from Woodhays Road. This slide shows the main application site where the residential development was approved in relation to the site of the proposed proposed pedestrian improvement works required under Condition 10.3. Here we also have an aerial shot of a similar site. The red line at the bottom of the site here is the boundary with Dorset. We have the main application site and then the position of the proposed pedestrian works that were required under the condition. Since the original report was written, 7 additional letters of objection have been received. They do not raise any additional points from those which have already been summarised within the case officer's report and are available in full to view on the council's website. Condition 10, which was imposed by the Planning Inspectorate, required that no development should take place until the following pedestrian improvements have been submitted to and approved in writing by the local authority, and that those works should be implemented and carried out prior to the occupation of any dwelling after. These works relate to works around the Woodhays Road and Woodhays Way junctions, and installation of traffic regulations and general direction signs in the Ferge Lane area. Originally, the application included the details in order to discharge parts 1 and 2 of the application. However, these have now been removed from the application, and we are solely focusing on the proposals to vary the requirements of part 3 of the condition. This slide shows what was originally proposed by the appellants at the time of the appeal, and what the inspector made his decision based on, and what condition refers to. It shows traffic light signals on the junction of Marsh Lane and the High Street to control a single carriageway, as well as the construction of a 1.8 metre wide pavement along the eastern side of the road linking the 2 existing sections of pavement. It has become apparent that this is not technically or physically possible to construct the additional section of pavement or install the traffic lights, and therefore the developers have been working with the Highways Authority to find a solution which will improve pedestrian safety along the High Street where the pavement is missing, which would be technically acceptable and physically possible to construct. You can see here, in relation to the proposed off-site works, that there are a number of numbers which relate to some photographs that reflect or show the High Street looking north and looking down, just to familiarise members with the area. These photos are looking north. And here we're looking south. Adam will now explain what is proposed as part of the revised scheme.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, members of the committee. I did feel it might be worth, perhaps, Mr. Chairman, if I may, giving just a brief history of our role through all this, bearing in mind the thing on the table that we are looking at today is purely the item 10.3 on the original condition. So originally, the planning inspector appended that condition to his decision notice, which required the signalisation of that junction. Plans were presented to us as the Highway Authority, and because we knew that in order to implement such a scheme, it would have to have a legal agreement, I sent the plans of the signalised junction to our safety auditors and our feasibility auditors to check that it was A, not going to create a safety problem, and B, that it was feasible to actually put the infrastructure on the ground. That audit came back and raised major concerns over safety, with potential head-on collisions of heavy vehicles on the junction, because, for example, the signal heads had to be out from the edge of the building. So they, in that location, if you know that junction, they'd be in the middle of the road almost. So heavy vehicles would have to manoeuvre to avoid them and meet oncoming vehicles. It was going to create major feasibility problems with construction, because the implementation of the new footway with 125mm upstand was going to put the level of the footway above, in certain cases, the doorsteps for adjacent buildings. And that, with you build up that footway, that would not only cause an access problem for the doorways, but it could increase the risk of damp on the inside of the walls. When I was presented with this, bearing in mind the highway authority duty is to protect the highway and its users, I wasn't happy with the scheme. So I sent it back to the developer, raising all these concerns, and suggested, A, we have a meeting where we discuss all this, during which it was decided that we would shelve that proposal in favour of something better. That led to the developer having to apply for planning permission to alter the terms of condition 10. That's the history as to why we're now looking at this application. The new scheme, as shown up there, involves the use of signage and lines to improve the space on the highway for pedestrians. For example, you know the roads through the middle of Henstridge are not the widest highways in the world, and 2 HGVs passing in the narrower sections leaves very little space for pedestrian traffic. By implementing a priority flow section, we can ensure that only 1 HGV goes through the narrower sections at any one time, and that automatically increases the amount of space each side for pedestrians, which is ultimately what the planning inspector said at the word go. He wanted to see pedestrian improvements. Then, by use of the yellow boxes, drivers can see through the yellow box sections, and as drivers you will know you are not allowed to enter the yellow box if your exit is blocked. So it keeps traffic moving, but it slows traffic down, and ultimately that will benefit any pedestrian traffic as well. So these new plans were presented to us, and again I sent them for feasibility and safety, and the audits came back and raised no major concerns. So that plan in front of you now was then presented to the planning authority for consideration as part of this proposal, and again that is why we're now sitting here looking at it. Mr. Chairman, I hope that explains our role in this. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine, do you have anything else you wish to? Sorry, Catherine, you've not got your microphone on.
It should also be noted that many of the objectors referred to possible alternative suggestions that the local authority should take forward with developers, particularly involving the use of Landshire Lane and Marsh Lane as a potential bypass, for want of a better description, for all HGVs. This has been agreed for construction vehicles in relation to the proposed development, but for the reasons outlined in the report, the local authority cannot pursue this with the developers to ask them to do this as a full alternative to the development. So in conclusion, the principle of development has already been established by the approval of the outline planning application, together with its means of access from Woodhouse Way. The design, appearance, scale, layout and landscaping of development was also approved under the Reserved Matters application in 2021. The proposed amendments to the scheme would not result in a change to the character and visual amenities of the area, and no demonstrable harm to the landscape, residential amenity, highway safety, flood risk or biodiversity interests, and therefore the proposal is considered to accord with the relevant policies of the local plan. The proposed changes to the requirements of condition 10.3 will continue to improve pedestrian safety above the current situation in accordance with policy TA5 of the South Somerset local plan and the requirements of the inspector. Therefore, officers recommend approval of this application.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to public speakers. Can I start with an objector, which is Ashley Sherlin? Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Okay, thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Sherlin and I live in the Henstridge High Street. It's proposed that the southbound yellow box is placed in front of my house, where there is currently a solid white line or no line at all. There is, however, a pavement. At present, I park in front of my house to drop off shopping. Delivery vans stop to deliver to my house and those houses around me. The proposed scheme would prevent myself and others from convenient access. The likelihood is that delivery drivers and my household will stop as near to our houses as possible, which will result in longer wait times and greater congestion, as people will park at the beginning of the box and between the two proposed boxes. This will make matters worse, not better. The houses opposite my house and that of my neighbour have tankers that stop to deliver oil. There is no other access to these houses. At present, traffic following these tankers either wait for deliveries to complete or overtake on my side of the road. Under the new scheme, northbound and southbound gridlock is more likely to occur. Who will have priority when entering the yellow box? The traffic overtaking the tankers or the traffic on the same side of the road as the box? As concerns my own deliveries and the half dozen or so other households who are served by the access drive next to my house, how will this work? As I understand yellow boxes, you can only enter one if your exit is clear, unless turning right. Tankers arriving from the north indicate right, so that they can then reverse into the drive on the left. This will be confusing for both north and southbound road users. Will tanker drivers be fined for breaking the rules? I cannot see how the placement of the yellow boxes will make the high street safer. Cars, tractors and HGVs already drive on the pavement in front of my house, causing danger to pedestrians. Several of my neighbours have been clipped by wing mirrors. The yellow box scheme will not stop this, so what is the point of the scheme, considering the other negative consequences? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I call the second objector, Dr. Adrian Gamer? Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I live in Henstridge. I'm a member of the parish council and a member of the A357 group. This S73 does not fulfil the appeal inspector's conditions. The planner's report states it is not an ideal solution. The consequences have not been properly assessed, like they were not in 2018. Hearing from the highways, one wonders why the things that took place afterwards didn't take place before the appeal inspector made his decision. It took until 2022 to decide, no, it wasn't successful. You've heard about what the highways man said, but you also remember that the A357 group and villagers pressed hard to say it was unsafe. Without a raised pavement and curb, this footway, right in the busy A357, with only a white line and bollards, does not offer proper safety to all pedestrians. I'm thinking of mothers with pushchairs and children, elderly with walking frames, and disabled with wheelchairs. Are they going to safely negotiate this footway? The planner's report admits concern. Massive quarry lorries, milk tankers, and outsized tractors pass so very close. More van and car traffic. We have over 1,000 new homes built or planned in a 3-mile radius. Independent traffic experts have told us that 2 long yellow boxes close together and the narrowness of the high street will provoke problems. I can't see any reason why we can't have an HGV from the north and an HGV from the south enter their two yellow boxes and meet in the middle where they will have the gridlock. Large lorries or tractors trying to pass each other will cause this. Highways and developers experts have said so. Look at the words in their emails: tight, squeeze. They'll also cause a rat run because traffic won't be able to go past and it'll use the back roads, as mentioned in the planner's report. Lots of parents walk children to the primary school on that very route. Car traffic here will more than double when there are 130 houses on that route. Local consumer drivers will use this back route when traffic builds up in the high street. No provision has been made for either of these very obvious scenarios. Somerset Highways accepted the developer's scheme in 2018 and then declared it unsafe in 2022. This is why we're here now. It will happen again. An independent, full safety audit of this A-class road scheme and all the consequences is essential before a decision is made. The highway safety audit we were shown was more a feasibility study about whether two large vehicles could scrape past each other. And don't worry if the developers appeal again. The new inspector will be better informed and continue to demand full pedestrian safety.
Thank you, Dr. Kane, with that short 3 minutes. If we can move on to Keith Waterhouse. Thank you. You have 3 minutes. Oh, could someone just help with a microphone there? Thank you.
Sorry, it was turned off. Sorry. Yeah, my name is Keith Waterhouse. I've been an HGV and coach driver for 52 years. I've driven through most of Europe and Scandinavia, and I've seen all sorts of road conditions and road setups. As it's already been said, a yellow box means that you must not enter the yellow box unless your exit is clear. If you have a lorry which is, say, 50, 60 feet long, you're never going to be able to clear one yellow box before going to the next one. And you're still not going to have any eyesight down through the village, particularly if, like a lot of the lorries, are driven by agency drivers that are Polish, Lithuanian, Romanian, or something like that, with a left-hand drive. You've got very, very poor vision in that respect. It is definitely needed for a pedestrian access to it. I've myself been sort of squashed against the wall as the lorries have come through. As a suggestion of the alteration that was made earlier on about the pavement, a pavement at ground level would be fine, but it would need a barrier, like a curbstone that went round, which would protect it. The road itself, at its narrowest, is 13 feet. A coach lorry is about 8'2" wide. Where it's proposed the passing is going to be, it's actually 16 feet. And that's without the wing mirrors on coaches. So 8'2" plus wing mirrors, they ain't going to pass. We've already, found there's a lot of problems with noise pollution, and with what's suggested here with the calming scheme. Vehicles are going to be waiting within the calming scheme, and you're going to have vehicles stopping, ticking over, revving, pulling away, and there's going to be more pollution for air and also noise. If a lorry goes into the first yellow box, it's not going to be able to see its exit, so who has priority? You're going into the first yellow box, you go into the traffic calming, where the back of the lorry is actually still in the first yellow box. Is the driver going to be fined for that? And yellow boxes won't work unless there's an ability to have it, or policed, shall I say. I don't know what the correct word is. We've already got yellow boxes in Henstridge. We've got one as you come into the Ash. That's completely ignored. You have another yellow box in Yeovil outside of the fire station. Very few people respect that yellow box. So unless you've actually got a means of actually prosecuting somebody for stopping it, it isn't going to work. And people that are in a hurry are just going to be going through it anyway, just the status quo as it is now. And you've achieved absolutely nothing. The ideal situation is to have traffic lights, but I'm told that's not possible to happen. So all this should have been sorted out before the permission was granted to the housing situation was actually approved. This is a stipulation of the housing plan, and it must be disregarded because the yellow boxes will not work.
Thank you, Mr. Waterhouse. Mr. Waterhouse, can I just ask you? That's it, lovely, thank you. The next speaker is Mary Frith. Thank you, Mary, you have 3 minutes.
My name is Mary Frith. I am 88 years old and I use a walker to get around. I live on the high street where one of the proposed yellow boxes and raised curb will be located immediately outside my house. We bought this house 28 years ago, April 1995. It has no other access to the road, a completely fenced-in garden at the back and no side entrance. It is therefore very important to me that I have a parking area outside the house to offload shopping, etc., and also to load my walker when I am going out. My house was previously a shop and extended much later to become a larger house. About 4 years after we moved into the house, Highways came and put white lines outside the house to designate where we could park and erected bollards to prevent vehicles from knocking pieces off the house and damaging the car, which happened at least half a dozen times in my memory. The white lines, in fact, have miles out of the road to accommodate the parking area. When there is any hold-up outside, fumes from idling vehicles come into my house. In fact, many years ago, we had to move the smoke alarm in the front room as fumes were causing it to go off constantly. My car is parked between bollards and the house wall and has been the custom for many years, even prior to my occupation. When I leave my house using my walker, which I need continually, I walk directly onto the road. The pavement outside is very narrow, if there is any at all, and when I am going to the shop, I actually have to walk on the road in places because my walker is too wide for the pavement. I am not always aware of approaching traffic on my walks due to my poor hearing. I wonder what priority I will have if the yellow boxes are in place, or do I have to continually give way to traffic? The thought of increased number of vehicles along my daily walk terrifies me, and I have been losing sleep with worry. I urge the Council not to implement this scheme, which would not improve my safety, but lead instead to the loss of my mobility and independence. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frith. Can I now call Susan Sorbello? Apologies if I've mispronounced your surname.
Hello, I'm Susan Sorbello. I live at Waverley Farm Court, which is right behind the High Street. The house is back, well, they front onto the High Street, but there's no front entrance. I'm very concerned about the yellow boxes because of what will happen to the 150 properties which range between the Townsend Green and the Church Lane area, where those are the only two exits we have onto the High Street. There is no alternative way out. There's very few pavements. Once we have gridlocking because of the yellow boxes, it's going to be very difficult to enter onto the High Street. We pass lots of young children and pedestrians driving around the back, just as we do on the High Street itself, where there are no pavements or very few pavements in either area. What will happen if an emergency service needs to go round up Verge Lane, where I live, round the back? Will they get stuck in the gridlock? So we have very serious safety concerns. I don't believe that the developers have addressed the safety issues with this proposal. They have an obligation to to overcome the adverse effects of their development, which when you add another 130 houses in, it's not just the HGVs, it's the volume of traffic that is going to have to move down the high street, and many of them will go around the back. Some of us, like I said, have no choice. We have to go around the back. That's our only access. So I don't believe that there's enough provision, and I think air pollution problems as well. Sorry, I'm rambling a little bit. I don't see that there's any way that we can make the existing situation of the roads through the middle of Henstridge and around the back safe. I can't think of a possible way, which means maybe a bypass. I do acknowledge we need some extra housing in the south of England, but we cannot make this safe, and we have a human right to safety. I believe that's a human right for everybody. And pedestrians, walkers, runners, pushchairs, mobility aids, wheelchairs, all have that right. So if they cannot make a safe planning on our roadway, then the Section 73 planning should be refused. I don't believe they should be able to waive the number 10.3 requirement, and if they were going to make this decision now, knowing how bad it is over there, would the inspector have just not agreed to the original planning? If we've made a mistake here in agreeing to it, then it would lead to an injustice and perhaps to judicial review. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If I can move on to Councillor Ken Courtney, who's the representative for Henstridge Parish Council, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and councillors. I congratulate the case officer on her comprehensive report. I would just add one point to the background summary on the first page. Henstridge is, or was in 2018, a rural settlement in accordance with the South Somerset local plan, which means that development should be strictly controlled and limited to that which meets identifiable local housing needs. At the 2018 appeal, the inspector granted the application in large part because South Somerset could not demonstrate a 5-year land supply for housing in the district. Now, the narrow A357 High Street is not a new problem. As we've heard, there's visible evidence of impact damaging to posts lining the sides of the road and the buildings. The significant issue now are the lack of footpath or marked footway and parts where there are houses with doors opening directly onto the road with insufficient space for safe pedestrian access. I was present at the appeal hearing here, and I recall being informed in the margins of the meeting by a planning officer that the applicant and the planning department had a solution to the problem of poor safety in Henstridge High Street. This turned out to be condition 10.3 of the appeal decision. I will now refer mainly to the consideration section of the officer's report. As summarised in the third paragraph of the report under the highways heading, the appeal inspector found that the scheme for pedestrian improvements set out in the condition would be necessary in the interest of highway safety and accessibility in accordance with local plan policy. The S73 proposed alternative scheme does very little to explain to residents the safety improvements that the proposed yellow boxes would bring to the high street, and I refer to that diagram, which is all residents received in the way of explanation of the scheme. There appear to be just 2 pedestrian refuge points, nothing to improve safety for properties with front doors opening onto the road, and no footpath. On the second page of the highway section, the report states that the S73 proposal does not achieve the level of safety envisaged by the appeal inspector in 2018. It is not the ideal solution, nor that which was previously anticipated. While it may be the case, as stated in the third conclusion paragraph, that the Section 73 proposal will bring some improvement over the present situation, Henstridge Parish Council believes that the level of safety for all road users and residents in the High Street would remain inadequate, and the proposal would not achieve the purpose of Condition 10.3 or the concerns of our residents.
Thank you, Councillor
We
Courtney.
recommend that this application is rejected.
Thank you, Councillor Courtney. Okay, I'll move over to Councillor Nicola Clark, who is the Somerset Council ward member.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to stand up because my chair's very low, so no one can see me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address the committee on this application. I want to make it clear that Councillor Sarah Dyke and myself, as the divisional members, both strongly object to the application to vary Condition 10.3. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Henstridge. It's a small village that sits on what is essentially a haulage route, with numerous HGVs passing through it every hour. It's surrounded by farmland and small quarries, and so bears the additional pressure of tractors and aggregate lorries passing through it regularly. As a pedestrian, walking this route is intimidating at the best of times, and I just want to note to the committee that the photos that you were shown show absolutely no traffic in them. This is incredibly unusual for Henstridge. The idea of removing Condition 10, which required pedestrian improvements on the A357 High Street, is quite frankly dangerous and will have a detrimental effect on the community. The original proposal recommended creating a 1.8 metre wide pedestrian pathway starting from the Marsh Lane junction and extending about 100 metres northward. This plan aimed to address the critical lack of pedestrian access along the High Street in this particular area. The revised plan eliminates the proposed enhancements for pedestrian access and does not, in the opinion of us and the community, provide a safe alternative. Alongside this, given the limited space for one HGV in each direction between the two opposing yellow boxes in northbound traffic, there will be frequent queues. Large vehicles leaving the controlled area will struggle to navigate this section due to stationary northbound vehicles, heightening pedestrian safety concerns in this vicinity. Vehicles approaching from the north will have to queue in order to enter. This congestion will be compounded by limited space for two HGVs to pass due to the sharp bend, which obstructs the view for approaching drivers. I urge the committee today to consider these issues and the issues that residents have raised with you today. All of the many residents that you see here are here because they're concerned about safety. They're concerned about not being able to walk safely in their village. They're concerned about access and safety for disabled people and for parents with prams and pushchairs. Those that live on the road where this scheme is planned are concerned about being trapped in their own homes. We must support these residents to feel safe in their own community. And I just want to take a chance to say thank you to everybody for coming out to show the committee the strength of local feeling. In 2018, the housing application that these conditions relate to went through on appeal. As I understand it, permission in this instance was only granted subject to the satisfactory implementation of these conditions. With this in mind, we cannot now, with all good conscience, allow these conditions to be taken away, and I would strongly urge the committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. We now move on to Mr. David Matthews, who is the applicant. I believe he's on Teams. Do we have Mr. Matthews there? Yep, thank you.
Commercial renegotiation on behalf of us. Ironically, in this inflationary climate, the works proposed are 4 times more expensive than previously outlined. As outlined by highways officers, this was brought about by a mutual review of the practicality of what was approved by the Planning Inspectorate. We have therefore worked proactively and openly with officers from both planning and highways departments to deliver the improvements that are the forefront of this proposal. As an applicant, we have followed the feedback that we have received from officers across the board with a prerequisite of ensuring that the scheme is deliverable, and this is therefore a mutually conclusive outcome and is a notable precursor for commencement of the development. I would reiterate, we are not seeking to renegotiate the Section 106 and will be delivering the affordable housing 35% of 130 units, and are in contract with Adbury, who are working with us to deliver the rent and shared ownership housing that this scheme and Section 106 prescribes. We have every desire to commence with all haste these highways works and the associated other benefits that this scheme will yield, and will deliver the Section 106 payments and the much needed housing that's both needed for the affordable housing levels and open market. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to move on to clarification on any of the points raised by members of the public. But I'd just like, before we move into members, for the officers, if they could clarify a couple of things brought forward. One of them, which springs to mind, is the oil tankers and how the oil could be delivered without causing issues to the traffic of the yellow boxes, and also access to the houses that will be affected by the yellow boxes. So it's maybe an Adam question.
Yes, with apologies, Mr. Chairman, my knowledge on the full legislative background to deliveries within yellow boxes, I would need to check up on that. Is that something I can come back to you over the next couple of days?
No, we would need, is it possible for you to look at that during the meeting? I'm quite happy to pause if we need to before we make a formal decision, but it would be something I'm sure members would probably need an answer to before we could make a decision. So I'm happy for us to continue through the rest of the agenda, and then if you need some more time, I'm happy to take a short break if you need to get some clarification on that.
Okay, if you're happy to do that, yeah, I can come back to you on that.
Okay, members, do you have any questions on clarification of items that have already been raised by speakers so far? Councillor Stanton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure whether this should come at the next step. I wanted to ask a question of the planning officer. Does that come in the next bit of this meeting? Okay, thanks.
Councillor Wales? Same, okay. So if there are no questions on points that have already been... Can we just... Can I ask everyone to just be seated and we can... Thank you. Okay, so we move on to questions from members. Councillor Stanton and then Councillor Wales.
Thank you, Chair. I must say I didn't know Henstridge. I've just been there at lunchtime, walked through the main street, seen the ladies' parked car, seen 3 lorries go through in the space of about 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So it is a very difficult village to walk through. The bollards are very close to the houses to protect the houses.
Councillor Stanton, this is questions.
Just making it known, Chair, that I'm aware of the situation. The question is to the planning officer: if we were to refuse this, what happens next? What's the consequence?
Can I ask members of the public? We've all been very polite and listened to you. If you could allow the members to ask the questions as well, I'd be really grateful.
Thank you, Chair. In response to Councillor Stanton's question, if it is refused, the application, the option is for the applicant, probably the only option will be to lodge an appeal. That appeal will be lodged in due knowledge that the Highway Authority is recommending approval and the officers are recommending approval. And I would ask the committee to bear in mind that this application has come about, as explained by both the applicant and by Mr Garland, in effect at the bequest of the Highway Authority. It is the Highway Authority that are not agreeing the technical details which were subject to the inspector's appeal condition, and therefore if the Highway Authority are not agreeing those technical details, the developer's got nowhere to go but to try and find a scheme that will meet the Highway Authority's approval, which is what is before you today. So in short, Councillor, if the committee refuses this, it is likely to go to an appeal, and there will be an appeal where the local authority will have to defend its decision without the benefit of the highway authority supporting that decision of the committee. So the committee will need to find our own independent highway consultants, if possible, to defend the appeal on behalf of ourselves.
Thank you. Councillor Ware.
Thank you. During the officer's presentation, there was mention that a plan had been put in place for the construction lorries to go on a route which didn't take them through the high street. Did I hear that right? That's the first part.
Yes, you did.
Can you show it to us on a map at all?
I'm not entirely sure of the route that is completely accurate.
Again, members of the public, we've listened to you. If you can allow the officers to speak, I'd be really grateful.
The construction management plan uses the Lancashire Lane route, which follows this route around here and up, and then back up onto the A30 at this point.
Does that avoid the heavy vehicles which are used in construction going through the village?
Vehicles in association with the construction of the development proposed, yes.
Okay. And the second part, Chair, if I may, is I understood from the presentation that this couldn't obviously be part of the conditions, that you couldn't expect the developer to have any payment, if you like, for making that route other than for construction vehicles, if you get my point.
Yes, that's correct. The works involved, as outlined in the committee report, with having that prepared as a permanent resolution to divert all traffic which isn't in association with the development. The amount of work, ownership issues, funding and so forth that would be required, the amount of work that the developers would be required to do or contribute to isn't meeting the necessary tests of the planning policy guidance, so we couldn't demand that they do that.
Sorry, has that been considered by the Highways Department in conjunction with this application? I know it would have to be paid for by Highways out of our council tax, but I would just wonder if that had been a consideration at any stage during this long application.
Just while Adam's working on the other issues that have been, yes, I believe that they have looked at it on a very basic level, but haven't been involved with all of the structural surveys, funding and land ownership issues, etc. So haven't done the complete, and that's outlined in the report of the processes and reasons behind it.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of points. Again, in the report, and I think this comes possibly from some of the comments raised by residents, where is the evidence that if this Section 173 is implemented, that it would actually match the requirements that were asked for in the appeal decision? In other words, what's the guarantee that this is going to work? What consideration has been taken of air and noise pollution? Because there's been reference to gridlock, vehicles having to pass and wait. That will increase noise from vehicles revving and idling engines, and that will impact on air quality. Has any account been taken of air and noise pollution, which in a climate emergency are becoming more critical and important? And also, looking at the timeline, this is my third one, you asked, I think it was back in January, February, that you wanted to see an amended scheme, the last line, just before February 23, on receipt of an amended scheme which removes the conflict, presumably between vehicles, and can be shown as such on a new tracking drawing, further consideration can be given. 13th of February, we'll consider it further. 28th of February, no objection, subject to conditions and/or Section 106 obligations as detailed below. What happened in between? What was the process in between to go from expressing concern to suddenly going, no objection?
The developer presented an amended plan which went back to the safety auditors, and they provided extra comments that said the original concerns on the strength of the amended plan had therefore been removed.
So why is that not mentioned in the report? Because that is quite a big jump to go for those of us that are lay people as to how you go from expressing concern. When you do the tracking, do you actually do computer simulation? I know computers and AI are great things these days, but do you actually do an actual simulation of what actually happens when traffic is moving along there and the impacts of pedestrians and particularly residents, because it doesn't seem as though the impact on residents living there has been considered. How is it going to impact on them?
Okay,
how is it going to
can we just
impact
pause a
on
second,
them
Councillor?
getting their
Councillor
day-to-day
Osborne,
deliveries?
Can we just pause a second? Members of the public, we need to bear in mind everything that's being said and go through all of this. If you keep disturbing by clapping and jeering, we're going to miss important information, and then we could end up not making the decision in the best interest of everyone. I really want everyone to be able to stay in here and listen to the debate, but if we can't do that in an orderly manner, then we will have to ask people to leave. So can I please ask you to be restrained? Councillor Osborne, I'm happy with some of your questions. I don't agree with you questioning why something's not in the report. You've been given the answer there. I think it's unfair to challenge the officer on why something isn't written in that way, but I'm happy for the officer to answer.
It wasn't designed as a challenge.
Councillor Osborne, I'm happy for the officer to answer.
Thank you, Chairman.
The comments in the report, the summary of the representations that have been received, list the various dates of the responses that come from the Highways Authority, as you've outlined correctly. That is a summary of the comments that have come from Adam as Highways, and his comments would have been based on, as he's explained, comments from the audit team. So that's why things change, is that he's had the opportunity to discuss the amended plans with the audit team, who have come to a different conclusion on the basis of the additional information. So that's why the recommendation changes apparently suddenly.
Thank you. Councillor Hobhouse.
Mine's not so much a question as a statement, so I better wait till the next section, please.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkins.
Just a quick clarification. What is the distance between the two yellow boxes?
I can't say precisely.
Again, members of the public. While the officers are measuring that, Councillor Wilkins, are you happy for me to go to Councillor Kenton while they're doing that? Thank you. Councillor Kenton.
My question is a bit more about process, actually. So this scheme, the scheme that's already in place, has been to council and has been to a planning inspector who said it's fine, and now we're saying we can't do that. So like I just question the process of agreeing a scheme, 120 or 130 houses, based on the fact that we are going to put this in to counteract the damage done. But now we're saying, no, we can't do that, so we can still have the houses, but we're thinking something else. So it just seems strange. It's gone to an inspector, and he said, or she said, that's fine, but it's not.
Adam, is that a question for you?
On sort of procedural matters to do with the planning inspectorate, might that be one for you?
You can take that.
Yes, Chairman, just in terms of the question, I think members, if you look at the wording of that condition, the inspector stated that no development shall take place until a scheme for pedestrian improvements has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. And then he goes on to say the submitted scheme shall have regard to point 3, a single control priority arrangement along the high street. So the inspector was saying that they had to provide a scheme for our approval, and it had to have regard to that drawing showing the signal priority arrangements along the high street. So the inspector at that point, when imposing that condition, was clearly envisaging there would be an additional process stage where the detail of that would then be approved. Clearly, the inspector felt the principle of a signal-controlled priority arrangement was acceptable, but the detail of that was to be dealt with later, and that's the process that the highway office has been explaining.
Thank you. Catherine, have we got an answer on the...
Yes, just to confirm the contents of the officer's report where I outlined the proposals, the distance between the two yellow boxes, between this point here and this point here, as in the report, is 21 metres.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or points of clarification? Councillor Wilkins.
Just to clarify that in English, that would be approximately 70 feet, which is probably the length of a lorry and possibly 2 or 3 cars.
I think you're asking a question which they probably can't answer because it depends on the length of the lorry and it depends on the type of the car.
40 foot is the usual length of a lorry in this country.
Okay. Councillor Osborne.
Thanks. Just one point. This condition was imposed by an inspector, which inspectors have the power to do, to make a development acceptable and therefore approvable. Unfortunately, when push comes to shove, that scheme wasn't practicable, and we seem to be in a position where an inspector has used his power to impose a condition which subsequently can't be met practically, and we've been told that by the experts in highways. It's a very unusual situation, isn't it, where we are now having to mop up the mess of a...
Again, Sue, this is a question.
Sorry, it is, you know, where do we go from here? You said the only route is appeal, but have there been any other schemes considered that would meet or satisfy what the inspector put in there? That was an observation more than anything. And also as well, I didn't get an answer to my question as to what was the evidence that if this section 73 was approved and implemented, that it would match the requirements of the appeal decision, which was to improve pedestrian safety.
Can I, before we go anywhere, can I just go back to legal to confirm that what the inspectorate has agreed and asked for and what we're doing now and how we've got there again is there's a specific way we're doing this. Am I right in saying that just because the inspectorate looked at what was there in that time, that's now been, we're not doing anything wrong by saying that's not feasible, this is now where we are?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, what you're doing in a Section 73 application is considering that specific condition. And if you approve the change of condition, what results is that you end up with a parallel planning permission with that changed condition. So it's entirely free for a developer to apply to change a condition. You have to apply the usual development plan policies and material considerations in deciding whether that condition should be altered. You've heard the advice from your officers and from the highway officer. In terms of the choices that the committee has, you can approve the application in accordance with the officer recommendation. You could refuse the application if you're not satisfied that the change in the condition is acceptable. The consequences of that have been explained, possible consequences of that have been explained in terms of an appeal and whether the council could defend that appeal and be shown to have acted reasonably in refusing that, or alternatively another scheme whatever that might look like, can come forward as an alternative. Your third option would be to defer the application if you felt you didn't have enough information about the scheme, or if you felt there were things about the scheme that you needed to see alter before you could approve it. Officers, I'm sure, wouldn't encourage deferral because it's kicking the can down the road in terms of a decision, but that is open to you, the committee, if you feel that that's needed.
Thank you. My apologies, Councillor Osborne, I've forgotten your second question.
I think you've more or less answered that. Part of it was air and noise pollution, in terms of has that been taken into account, the risk of increase of air and noise pollution, and what impact that would have on residential amenity, especially for people living by the side of the road. And also, this is probably one for legal, but normally when we've done planning applications, the requirement on a big developer has been to sort of ensure that whatever they're proposing doesn't make a situation worse. I don't think they're required to come up with proposals to improve situations. So where do we actually stand on this one? Because it can be argued that what they're doing could make things worse, but also is there a requirement on them to make things better?
Okay, I'll go to planning and then legal.
Thank you, Chair. I think the questions that Councillor Osborne have raised are very reasonable, in the sense that the point that the committee are looking for is we have a set level the inspector has raised. One of the reasons he allowed the appeal with the conditions was to ensure there was going to be adequate highway safety and pedestrian safety. Now, it has been shown, and I won't repeat it, that the condition the inspector imposed is not feasible and it cannot be implemented. So what, and I apologise paraphrasing, what Councillor Osborne would like to be assured of, if this alternative scheme is approved by the committee, if it is approved by the committee, is there still going to be adequate highway safety and adequate pedestrian safety? Now, I'm not a highway expert, I'm the planning officer. The advice that we as planners have received from the experts, the Highway Authority, is that this alternative scheme is acceptable in highway terms. That's all the advice as a planning officer I can give to you. So if the Highway Authority had recommended refusal because they were unhappy with the scheme, that would have been reflected in our recommendation, our formal recommendation to you as the committee. And we probably wouldn't even be here today because it would have been determined under delegated powers. So I cannot say to you, Councillor, that that bar that the inspector set is still the same bar. It may be higher, a bit lower. But the advice that we've received from the Highway Authority is that this is an acceptable scheme. And it is in fact a scheme that has been, I'll use the word promoted, Mr. Garland may correct me on the wording, but it is something that has been supported in its entirety before us today by the Highway Authority. In terms of the air quality, I am aware that in some places you have air quality management areas, AQUAMAs. I don't believe this is one here. But in terms of the traffic to and from, this was a consideration that I'm unaware that the inspector felt was a reason to dismiss the appeal. And from an officer perspective, the alterations to 10.3, which is being proposed here, would not produce any additional air pollution or air noise which would justify a recommendation of refusal. In response to an anticipated question of, well, what are those levels, what are those anticipated increases or decreases, I'm not an expert and I cannot give you that answer. But as I say, based on what the advice we've received from the Highway Authority, our recommendation is one of the approval. It's not a full answer, Councillor Osborne. I hope it is an answer as best I can give you.
Thank you. Legal, did you want to come in with anything further?
Nothing further. I think that's dealt with it.
Thank you, Councillor Best.
I think you've addressed some of where I think what we're trying to get to is that this alternative may be acceptable to the highways, but does it meet the expectations of the inspector when he looked at it and he gave the overriding overturning our refusal.
The point you've got to look at, Councillor Best, is what is in front of you today. This is an alternative proposal. It is an amended proposal. Is this proposal acceptable in planning and highway terms, or is it not on its own merits? You've heard very eloquent comments from residents, from parish councils, that in their opinion it is not. The Highway Authority, who've done their audit, says it is acceptable from a highway perspective, and that is the balance that the committee has to make. Based on what the Highway Authority experts are saying, and you've heard eloquent comments against it from residents, in your opinion as the committee, should it be refused, and if so, what are those reasons or reasons that could be adequately defended as appeal?
I keep hearing that it's acceptable, but does it achieve the same expectation as the inspector? So, yes or no?
I can't mind read the inspector, Councillor. The inspector allowed the appeal because he felt that with appropriate conditions, a level of highway and pedestrian safety would be achieved. We are being advised as officers by the Highway Authority that highway and pedestrian safety can still be achieved. Whether it reaches that same level, as I did a response to Councillor Osborne, I'm not in the inspector's shoes. I cannot tell you that. I cannot give you an adequate answer. All I can say is that Highway Authority are supportive of it.
Thank you. Councillor Hobhouse.
Can I start the statement, please?
Nope. I've got one more question before that. Councillor Stanton.
If I'm being obtuse about this, but the original condition for traffic lights, am I right in understanding that that would have allowed vehicles to go all the way through the village from one end to the other, while the vehicles the other end waited, and then the lights would reverse and the traffic would go through the other way at 20 miles an hour, presumably. Is that right?
The signalisation scheme was just on the one junction, and they were then putting in the footway on the eastern side of the high street as well.
It did narrow it down to one lane of traffic.
Yeah, so yes, you would basically, you would stop the two-way traffic because the lights would have controlled that section. So your comment about not necessarily going all the way through the village, but for the scheme itself, you would only have one direction of traffic at any one time.
Okay, that's the point I was trying to understand, thank you. So the supplementary question to that is, I understand that your concern about that was that the traffic lights would be in the way of the vehicles and get clipped and so on. Is it not possible to simply move the traffic light further back, north? It was the north end, I think, junction, wasn't it, the traffic light's going to be? Is that right?
No, there were difficulties with the whole scheme. The position of the signal heads was such that they would have caused a hindrance to through traffic, because it's not necessarily vehicles driving in a straight line past them, but it's turning movements as well, and the back of lorries don't track the front wheel sort of thing. So they'd have to use the full width of the road, and you'd then end up with potential head-on conflicts and this sort of thing.
So you can't envisage a placing of a traffic light control that would work and be safe?
If I may just take a step back here, the schemes that are presented to the Highway Authority are not designed by the Highway Authority. We are happy to look at, assess for feasibility, assess for safety, any scheme that's put in front of us. On the back of that, we can provide comments. In this particular case, the signalised junction and the footway raised concerns with us. So we went back to the developer and said, we can't accept that original scheme as conditioned by the planning inspector. Can they go away and think again, reassess the situation, put on the table a new scheme that still satisfies or works towards satisfying the inspector's original principles? That's when we received this scheme. Oh, it's changed. The original scheme, the yellow box scheme. If I may, Mr. Chairman, just going back to the question about delivery vehicles, the situation was I wasn't fully au fait with the terms of the Traffic Signs General Directions Regulations, which is the regulation which controls exactly what the yellow boxes can and can't do. There are certain types of vehicles, you see, that are exempt from the rules and regulations of the yellow boxes, and it's things like ambulances, fire engines, police. I wasn't certain whether deliveries were exempt as well, so we've just had a read back through the document, and it appears that delivery vehicles are not exempt.
So can I just confirm from that that there would be no feasible way of the properties that needed oil delivered having it delivered once these yellow boxes are in place?
Yeah, I think looking at the terms of the regulations, it's...
Okay, thank you. Members, I think, as you can understand, this is really important to clarify, so if I can ask you to bear with this, if I can hand over to the planners.
Thank you, Chair. All I was simply going to say, it's something that members are aware of. There's been slight discussions, I think, about possible alternatives. We talked about bypasses or movements of traffic lights, etc. Can I just remind members something that you do know, but I would just say it anyway, that the job for you today is to consider the application as is before you today, not possibly what may happen in the future or any alternatives. It's what is before you today, and for you please to consider that on its own merits. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm going to move into debate now. We've had quite a few questions, and I'm going to start with Councillor Hophouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm probably, apart from the planning officer, the only person in this room who was with Area East when they turned it down. And the reasons for turning it down were, one of them, this exact problem. At the inspector of the appeal, the applicant put in the original scheme that was passed to clear this problem. The local planning authority, David, accepted that decision and withdrew the refusal. And at that point, we have to say, why did they withdraw that refusal? If they knew that they'd had to go to the highway authority prior to being cleared. Now, I'm sorry, the applicant is responsible for this scheme, and he had enough time to have cleared it with the highway authority or his own highway consultant before he put it at the appeal. And I feel really strongly that the local planning authority, us, not quite, sorry, South Somerset in 2017, actually withdrew, and I repeat what I said, they withdrew their objection to the highway problems due to the new site at appeal, and the planning inspector accepted that withdrawal. I do not understand how we in this committee can now vote for this new scheme without it going back to the inspector and without it being cleared by the inspector.
Can I go to legal?
Yes, Chairman. In terms of the appeal, once the inspector has issued the decision, that is the end of the inspector's involvement in the matter. The particular inspector who made this decision. It is now down to this authority to make the decision on this application, as it's been made clear by the officers.
Okay. Does anyone else wish to speak? At this point, Councillor Whale.
I'm going back to the basic of all this, and what we're here to consider is highway safety. And quite honestly, as far as all I've heard and all I've read and I've listened carefully, I don't see how this scheme does anything towards highway safety, particularly pedestrian safety. So I'm not inclined to accept this on that very point alone. There are other points as well I could raise, and the yellow box is a very interesting one because it's quite clear under the highway code, as it's been explained. No one stops unless you're turning right or you're an emergency vehicle. To impose that on a narrow old village street where the yellow boxes, frankly, are an urban arrangement. They were, as it started in London, and they are really a city thing on junctions. That's what they're meant for. They're not meant for try to put a scheme in a village street. It's not at all the right application of a yellow box, in my opinion, Chair. So I'd say I won't go on anymore. I'll go back to the fact that highway safety, this scheme does not address that most important point, and I shan't be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I'm just going to come back to the planning officers to see if they wanted to come back on any of the comments that Councillor Hobhouse made.
No, Chair. I mean, Councillor Hobbit made his comments and the solicitor made a detailed response.
Okay, Councillor Wilkins.
Yeah, I mean, I do understand the point of view of the legal side of it, but the initial scheme prevented traffic from heading directly towards each other. Putting yellow boxes, as far as I know, doesn't have that restriction. Is that correct?
Yeah, it does, because if a vehicle travelling in one direction sees in the narrow section where the boxes will cover a vehicle approaching, they are not entitled to enter that yellow box, which will allow the free flow in the other direction. So it's not going to cause a sort of head-to-head congestion, if you like. It will keep the traffic flowing, albeit slower.
Can I come back on that? As a previous lawyer, I just want to clarify that I got something slightly wrong. It's 40 foot plus the cab is the length of a lorry, but more relevantly, as a lorry driver, when you see that it's too tight, you stop anyway. Having the yellow boxes, I do not believe necessarily changes the thought processes of a couple of lorry drivers trying to pass each other. But you know, that's a thought process, not a legal point of view. Sorry.
Councillor Hobhouse.
I would like to propose we turn down the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Hobhouse, if you're wishing to make a proposal, you need to make that proposal with planning reasons attached to it. So do you have planning reasons that you can give the committee now, or would you like a few minutes to...
Probably like a few minutes to get them settled.
Okay. Before we go there, can I just go to Councillor Osborne?
Yes, thank you. One of the things that has really concerned me now is when it was confirmed that delivery lorries, etc., and I don't know where bin lorries stand, come to think of it, are not exempt from being able to stop in a box junction, which means if you're having a delivery which needs to stop outside your house, whether it's oil, food, whatever, you cannot do that. It probably sounds like residents themselves can't even stop to collect anyone. That is a massive imposition, and possibly are there human rights implicated with that? I'm not convinced, despite the eloquence of the officer, that this scheme will actually match what the original inspector intended. So I'm minded to support Councillor Hobhouse because I think he has a very valid point. The inspector got this terribly wrong because they weren't highways officers, and maybe it needs to go back to the inspectorate, albeit with risk attached to us, for them to actually look at this again. So I'm happy to second you, Henry.
Okay, I'm not going to accept your second at the moment because we've not got a firm proposal. What I am prepared to do is to give both yourself and Councillor Hobhouse 5 minutes to look at what you're looking at proposing and to come back with some formal wording. But I would ask that if I can ask everyone else to stay in the room so that when we get there we're not waiting even longer for people to return. So I will give you some time to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Can we just hold on 1 second? I'll just check. Are all the committee back in the room now? We are. Okay, so I'll come back to you, Councillor Hobhouse, with your recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to recommend that under TA52, securing inclusive and safe, convenient access on foot, cycle and by public and private transport that addresses the needs of all as the reason for refusal. I would like to suggest to the applicant that 2 sets of lights at the wider end of both this narrow high street, which I know extremely well, having been born and bred in this area, that a 2-light system, as we have in Castle Carey, may be the solution to the problem.
Thank you, Councillor Hobhouse. Can I confirm that you're looking to include in your recommendation there something about the yellow boxing and the delivery side of things?
Mr. Chairman.
Could you pop that into words for me?
Right. Having said it addresses the needs of all, the inability with the system that has been proposed, the second system that's been proposed, to enable people to stop outside the high street when there's the high street houses, when there's no secondary route into those houses, is making it unsafe for everybody with the yellow box system.
Chair, thank you very much, and thank you, Councillor Hobhouse, for it's refreshing as an officer to have a detailed wording down for the reason. I've been trying to get hold of the applicant, but with no success, because obviously I'm a bit concerned that questions were raised which I couldn't give adequate answers to, like the yellow boxes that have been raised. And I note also Councillor Hobhouse has mentioned about the 2 sets of lights. So I'm wondering, Chair, and I'm asking through yourself to whether you suggest it to committee, whether the application could be deferred so certain questions like that could be raised with the applicant. It may not change the committee's view at the next meeting, it may not at all, but I haven't had a chance to contact the applicant to get...
Mr. Chairman, the applicant's behind you.
Yep. Okay. Just for 1 moment, I understand he's behind me. I've heard Councillor Hobhouse's proposal, and I've heard the officer as questioning whether we should go for a deferral. My concern, and it's for everyone in this room to decide, is if you defer, what I don't want to see is us back in a couple of weeks or a month having exactly the same debate. So we need to either have a firm reason for refusal or a firm reason for deferral, and what the outcome will be moving forward. Councillor Hobhouse, you've made the proposal. What's your view at the moment?
I will absolutely continue with what I've said. If it gets seconded, so much the better. Otherwise, I will accept a refusal.
Councillor Osborne.
I will second Councillor Hobhouse's proposals.
Thank you for the second. Could I just have 1 second of a bit of advice from the legal second? Thank you. I was just aware that the applicant is trying to speak on Teams, and I just wanted to clarify for transparency that at this point in the proceedings, we cannot allow the applicant to come back in and speak, which was the answer I was given by the legal officer. So we have a proposal. Councillor Patrick?
Chair, could we have a debate before we move to the vote?
I'm happy if anyone wishes to comment on the proposal that's there. Councillor Osborne?
I'm also happy that I know Councillor Hobhouse would like to refuse, and there are grounds for refusal on this, but also as well, rather than go through all the hassle of an appeal, could we possibly look again at deferral for the simple reason that hopefully that people will come to the table, that the community will be properly consulted, so we actually come up with something that might actually be workable.
Councillor Patrick.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. You've stolen my thunder.
I do apologise.
I'm in a difficult position because I actually suggested to Councillor Hobhouse his reasons for objection could be based on policy TA5. But on balance, I think that a more sensible approach to this would be to defer. I'm glad that Councillor Osborne has also suggested she may agree with that course of action. I think there are huge risks with going down the route of refusal, and I think this authority should do everything it can to avoid exposing itself to those risks.
Councillor Well.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. On the matter of deferral, we are told at countless planning meetings that we have to act on what is in front of us. And I have some difficulty finding why we, to defer this, is that acting on what in front of us? I don't think the reasons for deferral are in here. And they know there isn't an alternate scheme. We've heard about the traffic lights scheme, which has been not approved. So I would frankly think to defer it is just putting it off. And I would support the Councillor Hobhouse's reasons for not refusing this application.
Councillor Patrick.
I think in terms of the local authority being a good partner to do business with, deferral is the better option. And let me explain why. If we go down the route of refusal, there's a high possibility that we will lose an appeal and then we'll lose complete control over this scheme. The safety concerns, it will be decided by somebody else, as it was before. If we defer this scheme today, we leave the door open. We say to the applicant, we are a good authority to do business with, we are willing to listen, we're willing to consider an alternative proposal. It is a far more approachable method to get us out of this mess, is to defer this scheme. It is not kicking the can down the road, in my opinion. It is a way of, as I say, leaving the door open in the hope that a more acceptable scheme can come forward.
Councillor Stanton.
Thank you, Chair. I don't entirely agree with Oliver about what would happen if it went to inspection. I'm conscious of the speaker behind me who made the point that a new inspector might take an entirely different point of view, particularly if they heard the debate we've just had. I'm not against deferral, but I would only support it if I thought there was a reasonable prospect of another option for solving this problem being presented. And since we can't hear the applicant, I don't see any reasonable prospect of a third way.
Thank you, Chair. I would support the deferral. I think my main concern on this is around the delivery drivers, in particular the tankers. I think that from the information that's been presented to us, I think there was a hole there in the understanding, and I would like some clarification really on how that is going to be possible for people to get deliveries before I would make a decision on this, and thus I would support deferral. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Wale.
I would normally agree with the deferral route, but I think this one is different. How many years has this now been in the process? 2017. We're now in 2023. I know we've had COVID and we've had the phosphate problem, but we can't keep putting this off. No, that number of years is unreasonable, in my view. So we
with respect,
Councillor Kenton.
Thank you, Chair. I would suggest to you that if somebody put in a planning application which we are not happy with, there's nothing stopping them submitting a second application if we turn this one down with a more reasonable traffic plan. They don't necessarily have to go to the inspector and put in an appeal. They could go away, listen to what we've said, and put in another planning application with something that, based on what we've said and what the residents have said, is more reasonable.
Councillor Best.
Yeah, I think now with we have had it clarified that delivery vehicles such as the oil and all the rest of it cannot park on the yellow box junctions, so the detriment caused to those properties along there is significant, and I cannot see that deferring it, unless we're going to come up with something completely different, which I have my doubts, so I just think we need to go down the route that's been proposed.
Okay, I'm going to bring legal in a second. I just want to add a question to this. If we were to defer, are we allowing the applicant to come back with a new design plan, which I think is basically what the committee are asking? Although if it's a new design plan, should that not be a new application?
Yes, Jim, just on a procedural matter first, there's a substantive motion on the table that's been proposed with reasons and seconded. So either that's voted upon or withdrawn by the proposer and seconder. In terms of deferral, as I said previously, if you require further information or detail about this particular scheme, that you don't feel comfortable in determining the application without that additional information, then that is a good ground for deferral. If you are asking the applicant to completely redesign the scheme, then that, I would suggest, is not something that is a matter for deferral.
Thank you. I'm going to come to the planners and then I'm going to go back to Henry as he made the proposal.
Thank you, Chair. Just to remind members, it's not that the applicant doesn't want to implement what the inspector imposed. It's that the highway authority is in effect saying you cannot do it. So we are in a certain unusual situation that the applicant has submitted a scheme in conjunction with what the highway authority has advanced. So clearly it is up to members today whether you decide to refuse it or to defer it. My suggestion, if you wanted to defer it, was I hadn't been able to give you answers. The highway authority hadn't been able to give you full answers about the people, delivery tankers, stopping on the yellow boxes. If it went to an appeal and those questions are raised, an inspector would say, well, what answer did the committee have before it reached its decision? And the committee didn't have a full answer on that. Now, you may feel you've got enough information already to still refuse it, but that was the sole reason, so that could be explored further between the applicant and the highway authority.
Thank you. I believe, in respect of delivery, I believe that Adam answered that by looking that up and saying that the only vehicles that were exempt from the yellow box, please correct me if I'm wrong, were emergency vehicles.
Yeah, we can give you the full list. I think it's still up here.
Through you, Chair. So it's vehicles for the purposes Fire and Rescue Authority, ambulance, emergency NHS service, bomb or explosive disposal, special forces, police, and the National Crime Agency.
So I think that clarifies for members that your deliveries in oil are not in there. I think we've gone around this and we're going to go around this more. I think it's really important that we understand the advice we've been given by legal is for the reasons for deferral and the reasons for refusal, which have been clearly outlined by legal there. Councillor Hophouse.
I stand by my position.
Okay. Councillor Osborne.
Personally, I'd
just literally asking.
Regrettably, I think I'm going to have to withdraw seconding Henry, simply because in favour of deferral.
That's not a problem. Thank you.
But if I can't go down the road of deferral, then it would be refusal.
Councillor
There's
Osborne,
no way I would accept this application
Councillor
as
Osborne,
it stands.
thank you. You've withdrawn your second. Councillor.
Second it, Chair.
Sorry. Under the new constitution, to withdraw a proposal, both the proposer and the seconder needs to withdraw. So the fact that the seconder is now seeking to withdraw doesn't change the situation that the substantive motion remains on the table.
In that case...
Hang on, Councillor Osborne, if you can hold on, please. So, as I understand it, Councillor Osborne has withdrawn a second, and I've gone to Martin, Councillor Wale, as he's indicated he wished to second. Is that acceptable?
It's not necessary, Chair, because the proposer and the seconder both need to withdraw the proposal under the new constitution.
Okay, thank you.
The substantive motion remains as it is.
Excellent. You learn something new every day there. Okay, we've done this one around, and I don't think we need to go around any further. We have a substantive proposal on the table. I'm going to move it to the vote. Could I have a show of hands in favour of Councillor Hobhouse's recommendation to refuse the application? Can we have hands up again, please? Keep them up for a second. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 with me.
Nine now.
Okay, hands up. Keep up, please. Sorry. Keep up for a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9, and I'm 10. And those against? 3. Okay. And no, that's everyone. So the proposal to refuse the application is carried. Okay. Members of the public, I'm sure you would love to stay and hear our third application, but I'm also happy to give you 2 minutes if you'd like to leave before we continue.
We go to the loo, Mr. Chairman.
Before we reconvene. I just thought it was a really interesting comment from legal there, so you need to bear that in mind when you're seconding, that even if you withdraw, your second still stands. It's not something I knew either, but it's an interesting fact. Okay, we'll just wait for the door to close. It sounds like it, doesn't it? Okay, thank you, members. So we move on to item 7, application for Isle House in Muchenley. And we move to the officer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Okay, the application is Our House in Muchenley, Langport, seeking permission for the demolition of a garage and replacement with a 2-storey extension to provide an annex as a multi-generational living accommodation. The sole reason this has come to committee is due to the applicant being directly related to a member of Somerset Council's senior leadership team, as outlined under the scheme of delegation. The summary of the controversies: there has been no objections. Unfortunately, the Parish Council have not responded. 3 neighbour representations have been made, all in support. The location is just the south of Muchenley, approximately 2.5 kilometres south of Langport, and it's located at the end of a short access track coming down Law Lane. And an aerial just for additional context. This is the house as existing. The proposed demolishes the garage to the side elevation, and it's going to be replaced with a 2-storey. The materials shown here on the existing are those to be implemented on the proposal, so matching. Here is the proposal. It's replacing the garage and extending from the side elevation. The proposal implements a gable roof with an additional gable constructed perpendicular from the proposed. It's considered that the overall design is subservient to the existing dwelling in terms of scale and is appropriate design and detailing that would benefit the overall visual amenity of the main dwelling. And the proposed plans. The dwelling is located in Muchenley Conservation Zone and is also near to 2 listed buildings but not directly adjacent. Just some shots from the street scene, seeing that the house is partly obscured by the neighbouring property Rosendale until you get to the access track where it becomes more visible. The 2 listed buildings that are directly near the property are shown here. It's just Chasewater and Schoolhouse. In terms of residential amenity, the proposal implements windows on the north and south elevations. The nearby houses are approximately over 30 metres away. It does implement a window on the east elevation, which has been agreed to be obscure glazed by the agent to prevent any harm to residential amenity. And it's within an hour zone for parking strategy, and it shows provision for 4 parking spaces, which satisfies the Somerset parking provision. And in conclusion, no objection is recorded, and the proposal development is considered acceptable and proposed for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we move over to speakers. There are no objectors, no supporters, no one from the Parish Council, and I don't believe any ward members wishing to speak. So we'll move straight on to the applicant, and I'm probably going to pronounce your name wrong. Sorry, Alan MacLeod. Thank you. Could someone just swap a microphone for me?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the planning officer stated, the only reason this has come to the committee is because my partner is a senior officer of the council. We've lived in Muchney for 25 years. We're looking to take down the garage and replace it with a 2-storey extension to allow my parents to come and live with us as part of the same household. Again, as the planning officer has stated, we've sought to try and make sure that the extension is sympathetic in terms of both the size and the materials being used. We're glad that the planning office has been able to support the application. We've now actually received 4 rather than just the 3 comments and support from within the village, including the latest one is from Chasewater, which is the listed building just opposite us. That's now online, but unfortunately wasn't through in time to be a part of the package. But they're all in support of it, and therefore we hope that you as a committee will be able to give approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we move on to questions or clarification on anything that's already been talked about.
I want to short-circuit the whole thing and propose that we accept the officer's recommendation, as we've had no objections, no nothing, and I can see no reason for any questions.
The ward member's not put themselves down to speak, but who is the ward member? You are. So for future reference, you do need to let Democratic Services know at least 24 hours before.
I just wanted to add one thing, that it was mentioned the parish council didn't respond. There isn't a parish council in Muchney. It's a parish meeting, so they wouldn't have had an opportunity to, but you can see that 4 members of the parish, including 2 close neighbours, are in support, so there's no issue here.
Councillor Wilkins? Okay. Before I go to that proposal, if there are no more questions, I will just quickly ask if anyone wishes to debate anything on this. If not, I'm happy to take the proposal.
I was just going to second the proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Osborne?
Sorry, I'm not objecting at all. The only reason this is here is because of the policy over relations and planning permissions. But previously, under South Somerset, household applications, it was policy, were all done by delegated decision. They did not come to committee as such. And that's the only reason, and the officer connection is the only reason that this one is here. So carry on, Henry. You know, I'm quite happy with this as it stands. I've got no objection at all.
Mr. Chairman, can I please point out that in North Cadbury, I have 2 officers living in North Cadbury. I live there. We had both applications at Area East because they had to come in front of a planning committee because the rules in South Somerset were identical to this council. Thank you.
Okay, I agree with you, and I agree with how you've interpreted the policy, but we'll move to the fact that you have a proposal and a seconder in front of you. Can I have a show of hands in favour of approving, I've not even got the sentence out yet, look, of approving the application? Okay, it's unanimous. It is. Thank you very much. I'm now going to slide 2 extra things. No, I'm not. So thank you very much, members, for coming along, and I will close the... Oh, sorry, before I do, you've got appeals to note on the... in the back of your pack, the appeal decisions, if everyone can take note of those. Yes? Okay, thank you. I will close the meeting at 4:33. Thank you very much.
Well done.